Hello, I'm here to talk about Tales of a Female Nomad Living at Large in the World by Rita Gelman. This is a memoir of Rita's years in late middle age, traveling the world and basically living as a nomad. In the late 1980s, Rita and her husband decide that they need to take a 2-month break. So Rita, who studied anthropology at university many years before but has had no full-time career, decides to go down to Mexico to spend those 2 months. Ultimately, she and her husband end up getting divorced, and she begins to backpack or travel her way around the world at a very low cost, and she ends up spending some time in Mexico. She spends a lot of time in Bali. She ends up in Canada, New Zealand, Thailand. I think she spends between 6 and 8 years actually living in Bali. She finds communities and families along the way. Tales of a Female Nomad is about self-discovery and about forging her own identity, the identity that she's always wanted to embrace and discover. I'm just going to read you a short passage of Rita's arrival in Bali to give you a taste of how the writing is. I probably should have mentioned earlier, but Tales of a Female Nomad is a few years old. It was published in 2001. Yeah, it was published in 2001, so it's a bit old, but still very relevant. I'm going to read you a bit of a passage. I have no idea where we are or who it is that I'm about to meet. I leave my bags in the car and hold off paying for the cab. At least I'll have transportation out if I need it. I walk through an arched gate into a grassy garden and am welcomed by the sweet perfume of a gardenia bush that is nearly as tall as I and filled with fragrant white flowers. A tiny old woman, topless, her waist-length grey hair hanging down her back, is stooped over, sweeping leaves and flowers off the grass with a 3-foot-long broom. The noisy swish of the bristles, made of palm leaf veins tied together, allows me to watch unnoticed for a few minutes. Her waif-like body is wrapped from the waist down in a faded brown and tan sarong. As she sweeps, she hunches over, holding her left hand behind her back. With her right hand, she brushes pink petals and brown leaves into little piles. I step onto the stone path in front of her. She looks up, smiles toothlessly, and feeling modest in front of a Western stranger, puts her hands across her naked chest. I smile back and read the paper to her. I gusti I won't even try that. It's in the local language, but anyway. She nods, smiles, and rushes off. Soon the two younger women, one in her 30s, the other in her 40s, approach smiling. There is a lot of smiling in Bali. They are dressed in Western skirts, flip-flop, rubber sandals, and t-shirts. The older and heavier of the two is wearing a t-shirt that says, "We are the world." I show them the paper. They nod. The older one walks beside me to a nearby patio, sits me down on a bamboo chair, and asks me if I want kopi. I nod, smiling. The other goes off, deeper into the compound. A few minutes later, 2 cups of coffee appear, one for me, and the other for a tiny, beautiful woman who looks about 40 years old. So this meeting, when Rita meets the family that she ends up staying for many years with, is very typical of many meetings described throughout this novel. When Rita travels somewhere, she often does not have a plan as to where she's going to stay. She tries to immerse herself in the local culture as much as possible, and she aims not to judge, but rather to observe and take part in the local customs. So I guess I would classify Tales of a Female Nomad as a travel memoir. So if you're looking for a very good travel memoir, try Tales of a Female Nomad. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and it was definitely worth the $1 I paid for it secondhand.